Welcome to another war game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
Today we're taking a look at a new-ish game. I think it's new, right?
Yeah, 2021.
Alright, new game
Couple
from
months ago.
a company called CSL, which is Conflict Simulations Limited. And this is Mons 1914. And this is obviously a World War I game.
Yep.
It is a two-player hex and counter war game. And this is specifically the very end of the Mons offensive, when the British were, like, you have, I think it's the fourth...
Yeah, I'm not sure what the designations are.
I'm like, the British are fighting a rearguard action. That's all the purpose of this game is.
Ultimately, historically, didn't the British hold them here for like 6 or 8 hours, enough to really retreat and not be run down from behind, I think?
But that's what this particular game covers.
And it feels like that.
Oh, yes. You fight a rearguard action as the British.
I feel like that's exactly what we're doing. You're really taking your pot shots as the British and kind of skedaddling as much as you can.
Yes.
You can't get too far.
No.
Bad terrain. And then the Germans have 6 or 8 cavalry units that are kind of acting as speed bumps.
Yeah, and trying to outflank and cause
to make it
issues.
so it's more costly for you to move, and therefore the German units can catch you.
And the Germans have 2 full divisions with twice as many units.
Right.
With this big wall kind of moving up.
So it really feels like that. I think from that perspective, very well designed. You know, it's a tactical level game, meaning it's really worried about the concepts of, like we talked about, spotting and
movement, terrain, line of sight, making fire groups with like a leader and separate divided out brigades. So it's not tactical scale.
Right, it's tactical in the way that the game plays out,
yes.
is what we're trying to say. Yeah, it's definitely not a squad-based or a man, one counter, one man, that type of tactical game, but a lot of the concepts are tactical.
Yes,
so,
and that's what the game, I think, really tried to do.
Yeah.
Is even at this much larger scale than man or squad counters. Like,
that's battalions, right? For the Germans, mostly.
Yeah, I think it's enough where you're thinking about the same kinds of things that you would in a game like that. And it was interesting to see that kind of play out.
Yeah.
Like, you have a single howitzer unit. Well, the howitzer unit isn't just one howitzer, right? It's a little battery of them, and it can fire just like a howitzer would.
Yep.
But you need a spotter for that, and so you get a feel like something like Combat Commander. You've got to have your little leader to be able to get line of sight to someone to spot for the artillery that's going to shoot. It's you get those little bits and pieces in this to give it that feel,
so it's extracting those concepts and putting them in a little larger scale game. So I think from that respect, I think Ray did a great job of designing this so that it felt like that. I felt like those were things we were concerned about.
Yeah, I think that was what they set out to do in his little thesis of this, so to speak, and it did those things, right? This isn't an operational game. You're not worried about supply in any way.
No.
And a lot of games at this scale, that would be something that you'd be concerned about.
Yeah.
But in this one, that's not the case. And the time scale also aids that, right? This game is like 6 hours is what you play out.
Yeah, it's 16 turns, I think, right? Give or take. Maybe it's...
Yes, I think it's 16 turns.
Yeah. Total of 16 turns. And it's a race, right? Yeah. The Germans are trying desperately to clear the road from the north of the map to the south of the map. I'm not going to butcher the name.
Yes.
Maybe you can, but...
I'm not going to either.
Okay. So you're trying to clear this road to make a continuous line of hexes.
Yes.
And that's challenging, right? Because you've got enough units up there to offer a fairly stiff resistance.
Yes.
I do have some flanking units to try to get around you and maybe put pressure on your southern defenses, but clearing out these 4 big stacks, that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and so I've got all my second kind of batch of units are positioned in that town on the very south edge of the map board.
Yep.
And they are fixed. They can't do anything until like
turn 12.
Turn 12. Or if there's some conditions that allow them to unlock before that, which are bad.
Like
that means things are going very bad.
Routed units make it within line of sight, which would be really bad.
Yeah, things aren't going well.
Because we played for multiple turns, and I'm not sure we had even one unit routed.
No, but we had units dying instead of routing.
We did. We have quite a bloody pile over here.
So there's almost like two stages to this, right? You're trying to clear that initial line of defense, move as efficiently as possible through the forests over the hills, and then to take that town.
Yeah.
The Germans are pressed for time to do that.
They are. Yep.
Because whilst I don't have many units as the British, I'm not trying to. I will. First off, will never be able to kill all of your units.
No, absolutely
not. That's not the purpose of the game.
Nope.
I'm trying to slow you down as much as possible. We'll do some valiant defense over here.
Yeah.
Pick off bits and pieces, force you to, try and use as many of your machine gun and artillery assets as possible.
Because once those fire, they can't move, so that really slow. You can see my howitzers are kind of back.
Yeah, if I can slow those down, then it's only the infantry that are moving forwards. And then if it's just a bunch of infantry coming up against my defenses, I'm feeling a little bit better about that.
Yeah.
And normally, I don't know, games like this where it's, I'm not going to say it's one-sided, but it's
understood.
Very, the objectives are very skewed one way or the other, right? You have to move and do everything, and I'm just kind of trying to stop you.
Yep.
I know.
You're never going to launch major counterattacks to cut my lines, and you just don't have the...
Cutting lines doesn't do anything in this game.
Well, you don't have the ability to do anything like that. You're simply trying to spread out, hold those lines. The one thing I did enjoy about playing the Germans, there's a lot of opportunity for quote-unquote maneuver.
Yes.
I felt like my initial placement of my cavalry units was very important. I thought I did a hell of a job getting them so they kind of created an outer perimeter. Then, bringing in all my other units, it would have been very easy for me to say, I'm just going to put them all on the road, because you get so many movement benefits for being on the road. But I had to look at the situation where you set up, and it's like I tried to create alleyways, and you can see I've got two very good pushes. This is after that final movement we made before we decided to call it. I enjoyed that, because it felt like it was maneuver. Does that make sense?
Which again goes back to the thesis of this game. It's what he was trying to put into a game.
Yeah.
Where this is 1914. This is early war where
you don't have lines of trenches already stalemated and built for hundreds of miles. But we're getting to that point, But this was not that style of fighting.
This is that first initial push where there was a lot of movement, a lot of maneuver on a grand scale, and on a smaller scale like this, where you were trying to encircle units, push them back. Yeah. I don't know, and it felt that way as the British. I'm like, I can see that, the arms are encircling. I'm like, so I'm trying to retreat.
Yep.
But I'm also trying to maybe do some pot shots here and there.
And the real key, and you already mentioned it, was that do I use my powerful machine gun?
Yes.
To add to my attack total combat factors, because then you could really potentially hurt me badly. But guess what? You're stuck now.
Yep.
And you can see your 3 stacks here, I'm starting to whittle them down.
And they locked in combat if I continue to use those.
Yeah, because you can't move those machine guns. So you can abandon the machine gun. I don't think that's wise.
Well, yeah, it's
because the infantry don't have that restriction.
Yes.
That was an interesting concept of the game. I found that to be almost like a tactical puzzle for you, as well as for me trying to get around, subdue, and hold. I thought this was very well done in that respect.
Yeah, and anytime a game offers you those choices where it's like, this is good bad and this is bad good, I love that stuff.
Yeah, that's a good...
It's a little bit of a poison chalice, right? Yep. I get the really good attacks, I might do some damage to you, I might make you cause a morale check.
And you did some damage and did some morale check, which I failed.
But then I'm stuck there.
Yeah.
Which means I'm much more likely to be counterattacked. You're going to attack me. I'm actually probably going to get eliminated at some point if I continue to engage in that cycle. Which, would I rather be alive and moving back slowly?
Right. So you can consolidate your defenses here.
Or do I go out in a blaze of glory quickly? And then you can move around with what's left. How much damage can I do to
make my stacks not... Yeah, because there's no reinforcements coming. The other thing I thought was cool about this game, looking at that CRT, there's a whole list of modifiers.
Yes.
From target density, anytime you have more than one battalion-sized unit in a target stack, you're getting modifiers. I had several, 2 and 3. Right?
Yes.
So you're getting...
So see, I can shoot you. It's quite easy.
Yeah, there's lots of targets.
Yep. But you have so many also.
Yeah.
It's kind of like...
So it's like you can't miss. Enfilade fire coming from opposing hex sides.
Yep.
That was very cool. Elevation was a big concern because there's a couple, here's a hill, here's a hill, here's a hill. And it's like firing up, you got negatives, and firing, I really... while it made for a little bit of a challenge to really figure out what column am I shooting on, and what I liked that it had all these different DRMs. It was interesting to me.
It reminds me of a tactical level game in that.
Agreed.
Which that's
what he set out to do.
And they're like, I'm thinking about things that at this scale I don't know if I normally would be in the frame of a war game.
Yeah.
Well, some war games don't concern themselves with those things at this level, but they put those in, and I think it makes it interesting.
Well, it also gave it, I thought, a little bit more depth in that CRT, and because the CRT has a hell of a lot of results because they use a D66.
Yes.
It's 2 6-siders. You have to identify one as the 10s.
Yeah, so you use 2 different colors.
Yeah, and it's like you roll, and you can get anywhere from 11.
Yeah, 11 to a 66.
To a 66. That's a lot of results.
Yep.
And I remember the first couple attacks, I was looking at this going, I'm on the 4 and 5 to 1 table. And I can do 4 hits, or I could do nothing.
And as such, and the way they divide up the results into groups, so it's like 11 to 13 or 45 to 52. The way that those are spread is very interesting because if you've got the good modifiers, you can get, a +3 or a +4.
And that makes a difference because these are so close. If I rolled a 33 and I got a +3 modifier, I'm almost 2 columns ahead.
Yeah.
Had I just had one more modifier, I'd be 2 columns ahead, and man, that's a huge difference of a reduction. Or a damage. What did we call them?
The step losses.
Step losses. I really thought this was well constructed. It took me a while to really figure it out. It also took me a while to understand. That's what it's trying to do.
Yeah, it's got a wider distribution than using regular 2d6.
Yeah, and you mentioned this, right?
Yeah.
What are the results on a 34 in this system? Could be a 43 or a 34.
Yeah, depending on which dice.
Or it could be a 7.
Both of those would be 7s on 2d6. So you get there's a bigger range of results that you can get. The way that they've divided them up is also quite interesting. And as such, there's a lot of 0s, 1s, and 2 results of like step losses that get done in that middle portion of the graph. But if you can roll well,
5s and 6s,
things get real spicy.
Well, I remember your very first roll. You rolled a 66.
I know, it was amazing.
And I think
first roll of the game.
It did. I want to say
4 hits.
4 hits. I mean that killed a unit.
Yep,
it's brutal.
It was that was something else.
I don't know that we ever had one that good again.
No, I think you rolled a 4 hits once, but it wasn't a 66.
It wasn't a 60.
You had better odds and rolled.
Yeah,
like a 63.
I was like on the 7 to 1. I thought this was well done. The other thing I thought was very interesting in connection with the CRT was the morale concept.
Yes.
So your roll, if it was even, so a 22, a 24, a 36, it caused a morale check that required you to, make a roll for all your units and flip them or not. And I thought that was really cool. It felt random at first, but I think afterwards we decided, this isn't bad. It's kind of a cool concept.
Well, and they give you the option to you can include those 2 dice in your roll, so you roll 4 dice together if you need to. And so anytime you do that, it's fun to do those.
I don't know. I thought that morale thing was cool because if you flipped because you failed your morale, a lot of those units became
it was
nothing.
It was a severe reduction when you become disrupted or broke.
But yeah, that morale check I thought was also well done, especially how it fit into the CRT and having your leaders also available in those same hexes is important. I got lucky a couple of times and rallied my leader at first and then was able...
And of all the games, this one specifies rally your leader first.
Yeah.
Then the others. So because if the leader rallies, all the other units get the bonus from the leader.
Yeah.
And it tells you, do the leader first.
Yeah.
Like it's a rule rather than a suggestion.
Right. Well, it's what you would do. Because if you get him saved, then everybody else is more likely to do it.
Yeah, which I appreciate as well.
And we also talked about, that role, most units' morales are 9, 8, or 7. And it was 2d6, sometimes with a -1. So
and you had to roll under that.
You had to roll under. You couldn't roll 8 and have an 8 morale. You have to roll a 7. Right?
Well, I think it was equal to or less than.
Equal to or less than. So, yeah, very well done. I thought those concepts were good. There are also some interesting rules about, movement. And we already talked about the units. But some of the artillery pieces almost are... What's the word I'm looking for? Really challenging to use.
Yeah, so you have there's howitzers and there's field artillery.
Yeah.
The field artillery is what you would expect, right? You just roll them up and you shoot. Mm-hmm. Howitzers can be spotted for and they fire over any intervening blocking terrain like that. But both types of artillery need to have spotters. Mm-hmm. So again, you're trying to spot for those. But moving your artillery precludes you from firing that turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And firing your artillery precludes you from moving that turn.
Yep.
So you can shoot all you want, and they do have range. They're one of the few units that does have range in this game. But, we shoot and the British move away. Mm-hmm. Then now some intervening terrain.
Yeah.
Or I'm in much better defensive terrain. Yep. And if you can get your artillery adjacent, they then double their strength points. Yeah. It gets real strong, but they're also very cumbersome. It's slow. Yeah. Getting them into position to do that stuff.
I think that's the only part of the design I didn't get comfortable with. I think a couple more plays are going to be required for me to realize, okay, how am I supposed to use my artillery? Because I have such great artillery.
How to be as effective as possible with them.
I think about it, and it's basically like, should I just move them down the left of the board?
But it's so slow.
It's very slow.
You want to try and clear off the road, roll them down the road, and start blasting and then just start blasting.
And that's the... So that was an interesting thing, because I think there are elements like that from a strategic standpoint that you're going to have to learn to better understand how to use. And I think that's a sign that the game isn't just a one-trick pony. It's got a little bit of depth to it.
What we'll do is I'll show you the board and how some of this actually works, and then we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. I've got it under a plexi. It's a little bit more reflective. This is a very matte map. That's not very matte map when it's actually printed. That's just the printing technique that they use. This is a Blue Panther production. They're the printer who does this game. So you can see it's got these the large thick counters that you're used to if you've played games from any other CSL titles, White Dog Games, Holland Spieler. They all use the same printer, which gives you this kind of look. So this is the main map, and you can see this is the main road that runs. It's actually upside down from the way you're looking at it. This is north to south. I was the British sitting this side defending this southern edge. But you got these stacks of grey German units. There's 2 divisions. There's this light grey one, dark grey one here. And I've got some of my units scattered around here, and then down here in the south, I've got my last kind of line of defense that the Germans have to take out. So this is, I've kind of set it up as what it looks like halfway through the game, and partly because that's, it's a fairly free setup. You do have a lot of options. Basically, the British can set up any of their units anywhere along this kind of line, and then these guys have to be down here defending the town down here. And the Germans set up with a few cav on the board, and that's it. Everything else is off map, and they get to choose how it all comes on based on the outlook of what the British set up. So, showing you initial setup or end game would look wildly different and wouldn't be particularly helpful. So we've just set up some stacks so that we can go through some combats and movements and bits and pieces. So the sequence of play at the beginning of each round is both players attempt to rally all of their guys who are broken or disrupted. I think that's the word. They're flipped over and they've got their red numbers showing, basically. So both sides do that at the same time. Just kind of go through all your units, doing all that. And then it's British do a fire phase, and whoever you shoot at can shoot back at you. It's a simultaneous exchange of fire. Then all the British units move. Then the Germans have a simultaneous fire exchange phase where they can initiate fires and we shoot back at them as well. And then it goes to a German move phase. So that's it. These are all the units. This is everything that you see here. This is all the units. We've killed, there's like 5 that aren't on the map. But this is what you're playing with. It's not a ton of units. But sometimes you get a couple big stacks, especially once you start taking step losses. We did do some tweezers for this one. Just to make sure we weren't knocking things over. But because there's not a ton of units, and you often end up with a bunch stacked together doing combined arms, the turns go by pretty quickly, which is why this, when they say on the back of the box, I think they say it's about 3 hours or so. It's actually pretty good, and sometimes you can do it quicker than that if you don't play it out to the bitter bloody end, if things get skewed one way or the other. So, let's take a quick look at some of the units here, just to kind of get a feel for what we've got going on. So, the printing on them is fairly bold. So here we've got a couple units. So we got an infantry unit. They're using these. Just knocked it over. Okay, we got some NATO symbols here that we're using. So I've got the 4 and the 7 on here. It is 4 is your strength points, which effectively represent your steps, but they're also your combat strength as well. And the 7 is a morale value. So this machine gun has a 6 strength value. And it has an 8 morale value. This is a leader down here. The leader has an 8 morale value, and that red -1 is its leadership DRM. So it can offer that -1 DRM to friendly morale checks. You're trying to roll low with those friendly morale checks. But also, if your leader is contributing in combat, they offer their leadership DRM as a positive bonus. So this is -1. You would actually add +1 to a die roll in combat, which would be good as well. This here is an artillery piece. This is field artillery, 12 strength, 8 morale. And you can see here there's a couple extra numbers, and I'll show you just these, put those on ones now. With the artillery and the machine gun pieces, they have that white circle with a black number in it. That is the range. And then they also have underneath that a very small black number. This one's a 1, this one's a 2. That's its firepower value. We'll kind of get to that. It's one of the really cute parts of this game that I actually really like. Little bits and pieces like that are what make these games kind of interesting. So basically, when they do an attack, you roll 2d6, but you're actually rolling d66. So for example, let me roll these 2 dice. Well, those aren't great examples. Here, I'm going to roll these 2 dice. I got a light one and a dark one. And you say the light one is the 10 spot, and the dark one is the 1 spot. So the lowest result is 11, the highest result is 66. And when you resolve attacks, this is a 41. Oh, well, let me actually get it on here so you can actually see. This is a 41. And these results, they compare to a ratio-based CRT, but there's also a couple other knock-on effects that these dice have, which are really interesting, and we'll get to here in just a second. But if you have great, I'm kind of all over the place today. So when you perform attacks, if you have a leader stacked with you, you can combine fire with all the strength points that you've got, and you target an enemy hex, and you target a unit in that hex. At least that's what I believe is the case from what I've read in the rules. So if I've got this big old German stack here, the leader does not have a combat value. This machine gun has 4 strength points. This infantry unit has 4 strength points. And this infantry unit started with 4, has taken some damage. They've taken 2 damage, I've only got 2. So we've got 8, 9, 10. So they've got 10 strength points. And we're going to shoot at these guys. These guys have 1 infantry unit that's taken 1 damage. And they have 1 leader. And their leader does actually give them a strength point, because British leaders actually contribute and fight. The German ones don't in this instance. And what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to eliminate or break the infantry unit. So we're adjacent so we can attack. So I've got 10 strength points. And what you do is you don't go up against the enemy strength points. You look at the terrain that they're in. So it's not an odds-based combat ratio in attacker strength, defender strength. I'm a 10 strength, and then I look at my opposing terrain, and this is the defensive value. So they're in light woods. Light woods has a defensive value of 3. And so you do, the odds-based ratio is my strength point versus the terrain that you're in. So towns, for example, are 8. Okay, that's where you start getting into the good odds. Woods are 5, light woods are 3, clear is 2. So I've got 10 strength going into a 3, so 10 divided by 3, I'm getting on the 3-to-1 odds table. So when I roll that 3-to-1 odds table, I then roll my 2d6, and I rolled a 45. So you go 3-to-1 on your odds table, and we roll a 45, so go all the way down here, I do 2 step losses. So this 1 becomes a 3. Put them back on there. That's what I did. Now, there's again a number of other outcomes that are interesting. If I'd rolled a 41, that 1 is equal to or less than this tiny little 2, which is its firepower rating. If you ever do that, you can that machine gun can immediately make another attack. Right? It's going to be really bad odds. It's going to be 1-to-1, but it's a free attack, and it's a free attack that you couldn't normally have made. So I again really like that. And if you roll on the ones, a 2 or a 1 again, you can keep going. It's little cute bits like that make things interesting, and you get little heroic moments with this little machine gun nest doing something. I don't know. I really like that aspect of it. So yeah, this guy can make another attack, so he's got 4 strength points. We roll him again, and we rolled a 31. And because we're 4 strength going against 3 terrain, we're on a 1-to-1 table. I rolled the light number, it's a 13. It's a horrible miss. That was pathetic. That was awful. So, it's technically a 14 because I'm +1 from my leader being there, but it's not great, right? But it's a free attack that I couldn't have made. I could have rolled really luckily, and I could have been able to do a hit, but I didn't. That's not the case. One of the other results that you can get is if and this is actually much more likely. It's weird that I haven't done it yet. If ever your dice rolled number is even, so 50% of the time, it doesn't matter if you hit or not. If it's even, then the enemy has to make a morale check. So let's say I'd rolled a 16 on that. I don't do any damage, but I do cause them to take a morale check. And so the enemy's going to then take 2 dice, and this is regular 2d6. I can roll 2d6, and I rolled a 3, which is really good. As I'm going against my my morale values, I have an 8 and a 9 on here. You have to roll equal to or less than. And I'm -1 because so this is a 2. It's -1 because I got a leader there. So the British morale is pretty high. They just don't have many units. But it's if you roll really badly, you roll if you roll 12, then your units get flipped over. And when they're flipped over, their strength is significantly worse. And on top of that, if they were to fail again, they start routing and just running off the board backwards, which is not what you want to do in this game. But all of that is able to be done with this D66 system, which I enjoyed it a lot. It made dice rolls not just hit or a miss. Anytime you can have hit and miss results, and they have built-in other factors like machine gun, heavy fire, or morale, necessities. I really enjoy the way that those are kind of baked into that. I think it's really neat. But I would, I've taken a loss. I'm going to shoot back. And again, from what I can tell from the rules, you shoot back. It's simultaneous. You don't take any losses the losses aren't calculated until you've both fired. So yeah, I put that 3 there, but really I'm a 1. So I've got 5, 6. So I'm going to roll 6 back at them. The light number's the 10s. And I rolled a 35. Well, I've just messed that up. Rolled a 35. So I am I'm a 5, 6, 6 into 3. So I'm rolling on a 2-to-1 table. And I rolled a 35. 35. Oh, just. And I'm actually a 36 because of my leader. I'm a 35. I do 1 hit back to them. So you declare your targets beforehand. I didn't do that because I'm not very good at this game. But put the little 3 there. They take a little wound as well. I rolled a 35, so it's odd, so they don't have to make a morale check. And I didn't have a machine gun firing, so I'm not going to check for the rate of fire, for example. So that's that part done. You exchange fire, and then once the fire's been exchanged, you then apply all the hits. But if you were attacked, you can attack them back. This guy might attack here, this guy might attack here. But if you have machine guns, a machine gun, once it's fired, is marked with a fired counter. And if you do that, they can't then move in the subsequent move phase. So British go down the line, shoot all of their shots. Well, now I've got a move phase. When you're exiting enemy zones of control, it's +1 move. So I'm going to move 1.5 in light wood, so this is 2.5. And then I'm just going to move another half space on the road, but I'm going to have to stop because there's another enemy zone of control. Well, these guys, I'm a little bit worried because there's this big old death stack over here. But guess what? These guys fired, so they can't move. So the question is, do I abandon them and just run my leader away? Or do I stick it out and try to, get it together and help them as much as possible for next round, knowing that I'm going to take some withering fire from at least one angle, maybe 2. There is artillery pieces, so we got howitzers over here. They can shoot indirectly. So this guy can spot this unit, and this howitzer can shoot here, even though normally they wouldn't have line of sight through all the trees, as long as they have the range to do so. Field artillery is really good, especially out in the open. They're very, very strong, and if they can get adjacent to guys, they double their firepower. These guys are 24s divided by 2, because 2's in the open. I'm going to roll on this 10-1 plus table. You're hitting on every single result, and it gets extremely punishing if you do roll well on those as well. But it's hard to level your guns, because your guns are very slow, and every time you fire them, you then can't move them. So you have to be very judicious about when you fire your special weapons, how much you want to commit to that, and the knock-on effects of, it makes me immobile, makes me not be able to use those assets in maneuver warfare, which this game tries to simulate and does so quite well. But that's kind of the crux of the game. Brits shoot, Brits do their move, then the Germans get to do their shoots, and again, it's this exchange of fire. Really, really big fan of that. Then they do all their moves. But it's trying to break this and move around, which they will do. The reality is in a game, they will do this. The problem is they have to do it efficiently and do it with enough haste that they can then move across the map, get down here, and do it all again with these defenders who are in a town. Very, very hard to move them out of there. And you got to kind of break them apart. You have to clear off this road. And if you can do that, then the Germans are going to win the game. They'll auto win the game if they do that. If they don't, then at the end of 16 turns, you just go to victory points, and victory points are calculated by basically how many losses that you inflicted on the opponent, is what it comes down to. So that's kind of a look at how this game works, and what we'll do is we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So that was a look at the map. I think something that you'd mentioned earlier, not on when we were talking, this would make an excellent solo game.
Oh, I agree, yes.
There's no hidden information. At all. So you and the turn structure is such that you just make the best fire attacks, make the best moves. Then it flips to the Germans. You make your best fire attacks, make your best moves. Yeah. And the fires are simultaneous, so you kind of exchange fire. Yeah. Which I always like games where you have that exchange of fire. It seems more realistic.
Well, it seems more time realistic, right? Yeah. Where I'm not just going to sit there while you're blowing me away. I'm going to put my finger on the trigger.
Almost, most combats you're exchanging fire.
Yeah.
And games that do that,
unless you're ambushed or you're surprised, but you're exchanging fire.
And I like that. It feels good. It feels reasonable to do that. But that this is one where, but also because of the situation, this might not appeal to everyone, where one person's kind of on the defensive, getting hammered, making a retreat. Yep. Us old crusty grognards, enjoy this kind of thing? Can I do a good rearguard action, right? That's the challenge that I've set myself. That's what I want to get involved in.
Or can I break that rearguard action and really sever it and get in there and do what I need to do as the attacker? So this really would set it up well, I think, as a solo game.
And I think as a solitaire game, then you avoid having to have one person who might not be having as much fun, if that's what they were concerned
We always talk about that. East Front games, for the most part, it's like the Germans really powerful at the beginning. About 3/4 of the way through the game, they start to run out of steam, and then it's vice versa. So, these kind of things, this situation, the way it's set up, I think is perfect for that solo. Maybe not as good as a competitive game, just because but the victory conditions and the way the victory points work.
I enjoyed this. Playing it competitively, and like you said, because the victory conditions, you have to score an outright victory. You have to have a clear line of communication from the south map edge to the north along the road.
Very challenging.
It's quite explicit. And if you don't do that, then we go to victory points, and victory points is units killed, basically.
Yep.
And you have more units, so
there's more opportunity for you.
Die, but you can also wipe my unit. So but things get real interesting when you get down into that, because you're going to lose a lot of units smashing yourself against this fortified town at the bottom that I've been preparing defenses in as well. And those units hopefully are somewhat beleaguered from my actions up in the north.
Yeah.
So I still find it an interesting thing to do as a competitive game.
I would like to flip this and do it again, where I'm maybe doing the British, just to see how some of those things that I was thinking about would play out. And I think that's what the fun of these kind of situations is too. Yes. You can just turn it around, and because the reality is, this is probably, once you know the rules, 16 turns, it's probably 3 hours.
I don't know if it says on the back here. Yeah, I was
maybe 4 if you are slow like us.
I was pretty happy with the pace of play.
I agree.
Though.
I think we whipped right through it.
Generally speaking, you're always doing something, or you've done something very recently.
Yeah.
Even though the turns are quite structured, because the fire's simultaneous. I'm doing some shooting in your shooting phase. You're doing some shooting in my shooting phase, and when it moves, it's just It's not. It's not. A trillion pieces that take a long time.
So this isn't a 5-6 hour game. It's more like a 3.5 hour game.
Maybe shorter.
Maybe shorter. Yeah. And I thought it was enjoyable. I enjoyed what it was trying to do. I actually read through his designer notes, Ray's designer notes kind of before. And that was interesting, because it helped us understand, okay, this is what he's trying to emphasize, these different types of fire and fire rates and the tactical concepts. So I learned a lot from this game. I also enjoyed it. We haven't played a ton of World War I games, but
especially not at this level.
Right. But this is one that I actually really enjoyed.
Yes.
I had a good time with this. Plus, great little box. I mean, it's a little game. This is not a huge space eater on your...
I enjoy the artwork on it.
Yeah, the artwork's good. The components are good. They're solid.
I do wish this game had play aids. It does not have any play aids.
And maybe someone will put some up on BGG, but it needs play aids desperately.
That's something I didn't... It has a CRT...
But it's on the back of the rule book.
A TF and a DRM printed on the back. And that's fine, but...
Just take that and put it on one other piece of paper so we can have that out.
The terrain effects modifier is not pictorial.
Well, and that was interesting, because we were like, oh... Okay, so this is woods, this is light woods, just because they're different.
But everything's green.
So we had to make that determination about those, but I thought it was intuitive. But yeah, they could have put a picture of it.
That could have been clearer.
Yeah.
And just, a play aid would have been helpful.
Yeah.
Because trying to reference the rules was not my favorite.
The rules, I think, needed a little bit of work. That's just my thought.
Yeah, just need a little bit of tightening up.
Yeah.
Would have just helped to make it a bit easier.
Yeah.
To just get going immediately.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly complicated game, but you know, that's the only thing where I'm like, oh man, there was no play aids, and the rules could have been a little bit tighter here and there. About explaining certain specific situations and what's what.
It's interesting, because we all do this. We know something so well.
Yeah.
And explaining that to someone else who has no background or basis for understanding of that can be very challenging, and that's what rules are.
And that's why, that's why they invented technical writers specifically to do that.
And there are some that are really good, and then there are some that are passable, and then there are some that aren't bad. I wouldn't say these were terrible.
No,
I just think they needed a little bit of massaging and maybe a little more detail. A couple of examples might also have been a little useful.
There's no diagrams in there at all.
Yeah. But overall, I thought the concepts were fairly easy to pick up, fairly standard war game type stuff. Just a different scale, different focus. And overall, I liked this one. I'm glad we played it. I'm glad that we got to experience it. And I need to probably go back to more World War I games because I always find them interesting. Always.
Yes. So this is Mons 1914 from CSL. They have a billion games on their website, frankly, which is incredible considering this is a fairly new company.
And I think this is maybe our third or fourth game that we've played of theirs, and I have
a few more that we haven't touched.
Yeah, I've not had a bad experience at all. They're always interesting, playable. I don't know, and I learned something. That's what I'm trying to do with these war games. So.
But yes, check this out on their website. They got a ton of other games. Check them out. But this was an interesting game. Would make a good. It actually says on the back too. Solitaire 7 out of 10.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's even higher than that.
Yeah, I'd say it's high.
9.
You just do it too fast. It's a nice little solitaire game too. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.